audiobook by Eric Hasselbeck Ministries. So today we're going to talk about how the metabolism works and compare it to like driving a car and switching the gears on your gear shifter as you're driving. You wouldn't be able to drive very far, of course, if you don't know how to operate your gear shifter. And just like there's, let's say, like drive 1, drive 2, drive 3, then you also have park, neutral, and reverse. So it is similar to the gears in your metabolism. And people try all types of different diets, and they focus just on the food itself, and they don't understand how their metabolism works. And whether it's the Mediterranean diet, or there's all these different fad diets from, now of course you can go one extreme to vegetarian, vegan diets, you go to the opposite extreme and it's like the carnivore diet, but then you have all these other ones in between, and most of them are like gimmicks made out of like books and things like that. The South Beach diet, the Mediterranean diet, the blood type diet. There's all types of different diets out there, and most of them, the difference is, I even saw one that was like eating food for your personality type. The fact is that beyond different types of foods, really what you need to look at is how your metabolism works. Because if you don't understand how your metabolism works and the different, basically how you switch gears in your metabolism, you're not going to get very far with any kind of diet. So you have to understand that first, because people do a lot of different kind of diets and don't get any success. Like, why can't I ever lose weight? Well, because they might be doing things that are contrary or the opposite of how their metabolism works. And your body runs on hormones, and even if you want to do something in your mind, in your heart, in your will, but your hormone tells your body to do something different, your body's going to do what the hormone tells it to do. So you got to understand how even hormones play a role in that, and different, basically, what's called pathways within the body, and how to activate those pathways. So first we're going to talk a little bit about, and we're going to go through several different kind of things, talking about first the sugar addiction and the problems with carbohydrates and sugars in the American diet and Western civilization. We're going to go through and talk about the glucose on and off switch in the body. And then there's even also basically you could say a protein on and off switch as well. And you have to understand what happens when you're eating protein, and then when you're not eating protein, and when you're eating glucose, like carbohydrates, and you're not eating hydrates. There's like these on and off switches, balances within your body. We're going to talk about the 3 different types of fat stores in your body. And then we're going to talk about over a period of time, as you, like let's say from your last meal, time from 3 to 4 hours to 12 to 16 hours, etc., from your last meal of not eating, and what biological changes happen in your body over a period of time as you go, the longer you go from your last meal, and different things that are activated and different things that happen within your body. We're going to also talk about one of those things, which is your growth factor. We're going to talk about keto, which, using the analogy of like understanding your metabolism and how it works and the different metabolism modes within your body that your body switches to, just like driving a car and switching the gears in your car as you drive. Well, the same kind of analogy, let's say if your car was a hybrid and you had 2 different ways of driving, and not only your primary fuel for your combustion engine, but then the hybrid mode where you have a different kind of fuel your body runs on. And we're going to talk about ketosis and the keto diet. We're going to mention things like, we are going to talk about autophagy, which is later, and MTOR, and also prolonged fasting, besides just intermittent fasting, and some of the things and benefits of prolonged fasting. And again, we're looking at your biological functions and what happens in your body and how your body shifts gears as you eat and don't eat, and eat carbs or don't eat carbs, and eat protein, don't eat protein, things like that. So welcome to today's audiobook, and I think it's a fascinating topic. I know that was a long introduction, but point number 2. Now we're going to get back to, like, again, your metabolism and how your metabolism works and switching gears with your metabolism. Now, first we're going to talk about, basically, it's like the glucose on and off switch. So your body has a lot of different kind of hormones, and just like, one that anybody should be able to understand. So for example, there's like a testosterone estrogen balance, and if you're a man, you should have higher testosterone, lower estrogen. But if you're a woman, you should have higher estrogen, lower testosterone. But basically, that's an example of, like, in your body, it's kind of like a 2-part switch. You're either switch, okay, you're a male, or switch and you're a female. And that's how the body is set up. So if the switch goes the one way, you have higher testosterone. If the switch goes the other way, you have higher estrogen. And the estrogen-testosterone balance, it's not just like a switch where they're kind of like opposites, but they're also in balance with each other. So that is basically the on and off switch that God put in our bodies. And instead of on and off, it's just back and forth. It's just, there's like a 1 and a 0, and those are the two options. Because DNA, and there's over 3.5 billion strands of DNA. Well, DNA operates, well, technically 4, but really there's 3.5 billion 1-0 switches. It's called binary coding. DNA is literally like a binary programming language, and there's 3.5 billion of these 101010 combinations. And the encoders and programmers can actually use binary coding and actually program for a variety of things. But literally, the human body is programmed by your DNA is 3.5 billion strands of these 1-0 combinations. So there's a lot of these 1-0 combinations, or like, on and off, or just, back and forth combinations. So just like male and female, there's this male or female on and off switch or back and forth switch. And basically, just like if you put your key in your car, you switch it on or you switch it off. So basically there's, but in this case, it's a back and a forth. You're either male or you're female. And that's the way God created the body. And and then there's these hormones, estrogen and testosterone. If the switch is switched one way, your body should have higher testosterone, lower estrogen. But if you're switched the other way, your body will have higher estrogen, lower testosterone. So there are many different switches like this throughout the body. So the first thing we want to talk about is basically like the glucose balance, or the glucose on and off switch. So when you have sugar, so when you eat a good amount of carbohydrates, now if you just have, 1, 2, 3 grams, it probably won't do anything. But if you eat something and you have maybe 15, 20 grams, then there's a certain threshold, and a threshold is different for every person depending on your height, weight, the amount of muscle to fat ratio, and also like your age. But of course, if it's a baby or if it's a senior citizen. So everybody's threshold is different, but there's not like a certain number of carbs, but based on your threshold of your height, weight, and age, and muscle mass and everything. Basically, let's say you have 20 grams of carbs. Your body will activate what's called insulin, and insulin is basically the best way to characterize it is it's like this glucose on switch, and your body like flips this switch on and says, okay, there are fresh carbohydrates available. So insulin is like basically it's the fresh carbohydrate hormone. It's basically like your body is sending out a chemical message, kind of like a business with direct mail, a mailing directly to every home and certain zip codes around where they're located to tell every single home what they have to offer. So basically your endocrine system, which is your pituitary and your different organs that produce these hormones, basically your body will produce insulin. Insulin goes throughout your body and says, hey, there's fresh carbohydrates available, fresh glucose available. Woohoo! And the message is received differently by your different organs, depending on what your organs do. So we're going to specifically talk about the muscles and the fat tissue, which is called adipose tissue. So when insulin's activated, when you have, let's say in a snack or a meal, you just eat something and you have at least, let's say 15, 20 grams of carbohydrates. What happens is your body sends out this insulin message that there's fresh carbohydrates available. So like for example, like the fat tissue. Again, your body operates like in scarcity, and there's these different like stress responses, but that are very good for your body. And there's like these like switches and pathways in your body. So when you have carbs, now of course your fat tissue doesn't necessarily know, like, let's say if it not in modern times when food's everywhere, but let's say it was 2,000 years ago and you're out, you're like a nomad out in the woods, or you're up in the mountains, or, life was a lot different for most people for thousands of years, and they had to work a lot harder to get their food. So if suddenly somebody ate something and there's carbohydrates available, so the fat basically says, oh, well, like we don't know when the next time we're going to get carbs. So, carbs are available? Okay, so if the fats, your adipose tissue, your fat stores, well, their signal, their response to insulin is store fat, because we don't know the next time we're going to get carbs. And carbs are, all carbohydrates that you eat are, besides dietary fiber. Technically, dietary fiber is considered a carb, but really it should be it's kind of a different category. So besides fiber, all the other carbohydrates that you eat are broken down to glucose, whether it's starches, simple sugars, complex carbohydrates, sucrose, glucose, corn syrup. There's whatever it is, it's all broken down to glucose, which is the primary fuel. Now, it's just fuel. So glucose really has no purpose whatsoever other than fuel. That's all it is. Your body doesn't actually, there's nothing in your body made of sugar or made of carbs. It doesn't compose anything or make up anything. It's just a fuel that the body burns. So when glucose is available, your fat stores, when the insulin spikes, there's like a 3 to 4 hour insulin spike. So you have, let's say you go past the threshold, you have 20 grams of carbs, insulin's produced, it goes throughout your bloodstream, your whole body. It's going to spike and stay up for probably 3 hours, and then in the 4th 4th hour, it'll start to go down again. It'll start to slowly decline between 3 and 4 hours. Now, during that 3-4 hour period, your fat stores respond by saying, well, we're going to absorb as much glucose as we can so that we can burn it as fat. So we can store it as fat for later. We don't know the next time we're going to have carbs again. So, hey, yeah, give me carbs. So they go into like growth mode, like they start absorbing glucose and storing it as energy. Now, the muscles also, basically the muscles will put carbs first. So let's say if there's like protein, fat, carbs waiting in line to get into your muscles. Well, insulin also, because glucose needs insulin to kind of like pull it into the muscles. So to get into your muscles, the glucose, the sugar, blood sugar actually needs insulin to like guide it and direct it. So insulin comes up and says, hey, carbs are available, carbs to the front of the line, and carbs get to go first. And the protein and fat basically has to like sit there and like, okay, well, you guys are first because it's a fuel. So the carbs go first and it burns it as fuel. Now, when you don't have carbs, so let's say that it's a few hours later, there's this opposite hormone and it's called insulin-like growth factor. So that's why it's called insulin-like, because they're very similar, kind of like that testosterone estrogen balance, and it's that 1-0, like opposites. They balance each other out, but they're also like opposites, opposite ends of the spectrum. So when you have insulin, that says fresh carbs are available, and your fat and your muscles respond one way. But then, let's say after the 4 hours is done, your insulin starts to go back to normal, and then what happens is now you switch to your fat stores, and your cells are still consuming glucose, but now they can't get it from because there's nothing fresh. It's been at least 4 or 5 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours since your last time you had carbs. So what happens is now your body, again, that opposite, like that 1-0 combination, when the insulin goes down, automatically there's this opposite and balancing hormone that goes up. It's called insulin-like growth factor, and that's why it's called insulin-like, because they're very similar. Insulin says there's fresh carbs available, and your IGF-1 can go down, but then when your insulin, and then when you haven't eaten carbs for a while, insulin goes down, your IGF-1 goes up. Insulin-like growth factor. Now, insulin-like growth factor basically says that there's no fresh carbs available, and and the body has to get its glucose, blood sugar, from your fat stores. So that's what it does. Now, the other thing is that, so first we have to talk about 3 of the types of fat stores in your body. So we have to discuss that, because if IGF-1 tells your body to now you got to switch and get your glucose from your fat stores, okay, well, what kind of fat stores are in the body? How does the body access those? Good question. So, and again, it's like a switch. So it either switches it on, you have carbs, it switches it on, there's fresh carbs available, you stop eating carbs, it automatically by default switches off, and you switch to IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, and you have to get it from your fat stores. So the 3 kind of fat stores in your body. There is the quick and easy to access glycogen. Then there is the moderate to access, like brown fat, and then there is your most difficult, most long-term storage, hardest to access visceral fat. Now, the easy way to understand these, and again, it's common sense, because God created you with logic, reasoning, and wisdom, and discernment, and common sense. So if you think about it from how God created you, okay, so the glycogen, which is almost just like, again, glucose is like you just ate fresh carbs. All the carbs you ate are broken down to glucose. So that's like the fresh stuff that you just ate. When your body switches and your insulin goes down, IGF-1 goes up, first your body switches to this short-term, easy-to-access glycogen. And glucose, glycogen, very similar, because it is very similar. It's just like a temporary, short-term, like your body just takes glucose and basically just kind of converts it just a little bit into glycogen, so that way it's very similar. So it's easy to access, easy for your body to turn it when your body needs to access it. It's easy for your body to switch it back to glucose. Now, glycogen is stored in your liver, and then also some is stored in your muscles. And the average human being, based on the size, like the ratio of the size of the human liver with the average human body, well, basically most human beings will have about 12 hours or so, maybe 6 to 16 of glycogen stores in their body. So like if you stop eating carbs, you can go about 12 to 16 hours or so where you're on just glycogen, where your body has now switched to glycogen and you're pulling this easy to access short-term storage of modified glucose into glycogen from your liver, but it's also directly in your stored. Some of it is stored in your muscles. Now, what's interesting about that is we all have about the same storage amount in our liver, but endurance athletes, people who do and get more exercise, people who do a lot more movement and they live a more active lifestyle, but especially people who become endurance athletes and they train and they run and they swim and they bicycle and they do lots of, or they play basketball or they play sports and they do lots of movement and repetitive and endurance type movement. Well, in response to all of that endurance training, their body will actually start to store higher amounts of glycogen all throughout the muscles, all throughout the body. Because if this person's going to run a 25-mile marathon, they got to have a lot more glycogen available to be able, quick, easy to access glycogen to be able to do those kinds of things. So part of the thing is that when somebody's trying to, start off from scratch and they can only walk maybe a mile or so and they get tired, well, their body, it's not just about the muscles, but it's also another thing is that as they do more endurance training and they get more active, the body starts adapting to that endurance stress and storing up more of this glycogen. So the average person maybe can go 12 to 16 hours on just glycogen, but endurance athletes can go long depending on how much more they're trained in their endurance exercise and how much more glycogen their body stores. But that is the short term, easy to access. The next part is then there is the brown fat. That is more like a moderate type of storage space for the energy stores. And then there is, and that's really pretty much common sense. It's like, okay, it's basically just the savings of, and it's more your moderate, harder to access. But then there is your visceral, like emergency fat. That is the most difficult to burn because that is like a last resort emergency fat that your body would burn. And visceral fat also acts as a safety cushion inside your body. It acts as a cushion around certain organs. So your body doesn't want to burn visceral fat. Visceral fat is like your long-term emergency storage that if you were out of glycogen and you were out and you're mostly out of your body fat, your body will only get to the visceral fat as a last resort because that's like, it's there to keep you alive, not just as a cushion around your organs, but that's like the last thing you'd have if you were like going through starvation. So visceral fat is there to keep you alive. So again, the short term, moderate, and long term, hardest to access. Now, another way to understand this, going back to, like there's the immediate access, like glucose, that like fresh food you just ate. Then there's your short term, easy, but still easy to access glycogen. Then there's like your brown fat, and then there's your visceral fat. Let's use an analogy from a money perspective. Okay, so let's think of the difference between cash, a checking account, a savings account, and then like long term retirement investment funds. Now, if you have cash available, let's say you just sold something and, okay, you got cash in your pocket. Well, you're probably going to spend that first, right? Because it's like, people take cash and, okay, I got cash in my pocket, so here. So that's like your short-term immediate glucose. Like you just ate something, so your body now has like this cash energy and it's, it's like, well, we'll spend that first. But then when you run out of cash, what do? You got to pull out your debit card and you got to switch to your checking account. Now, your checking account's still pretty easy to access, but you have to have like a debit card. You have to have some kind of card, and then they're going to have a merchant service where you swipe it or put the chip in, whatever, and then you're going to have to enter in like a PIN number. So it's a little bit more difficult to access, but it's still pretty simple. And that's like the difference between glucose from the food that you just ate, or glycogen that your body saved up in your liver and throughout your muscles. But then what happens if your checking account runs out? That's where your savings account comes in. And then, the savings, it might be a little bit more difficult to access. You might have to log into your account and like transfer funds from your savings to your checking. Or a lot of accounts, they have that thing where if your checking doesn't have enough, it'll automatically pull it from your savings. Sometimes maybe there's a fee or something, but that's like your brown fat. That is like your more moderate store of energy. So kind of like the difference between a checking and a savings is like the difference between your checking account and your savings account. Now, then the difference between your brown fat, which is more like your savings account, and then the visceral fat. And think of the visceral fat as like a 401k or an IRA or like a more long-term investment fund that is a lot harder to get into. You might have to, sometimes you might have to fill out an application and try to get it. You might have to, they might make you jump through some hoops to pull that money out, but it's not as easily transferable usually in most retirement or investment funds. There might even be a little bit of a penalty or something like that, and it's harder to get. It takes longer to access because that is like your last resort. That's like the retirement investment funds that you would live on. So that's just like your visceral fat. That's like your more emergency last resort fat stores, and that's the difference. That besides fresh glucose from food you just ate, then you have your short-term glycogen, your moderate-term brown fat, and your emergency store visceral fat that also acts as a cushion around your vital organs. So now going back to the glucose on and off switch, again, that insulin or insulin-like growth factor balance is that when you stop eating carbs and the insulin starts to go down, the insulin-like growth factor then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the opposite end of the pendulum swing, insulin-like growth factor goes up, and then your body says, okay, well now I have to get all my glucose from the fat store, so of course it starts first with the easy to access glycogen, and then until that runs out, it's going to use glycogen, and then when that runs out, it's going to switch to your actual, like your brown fat and then your visceral fat. And now when it's on your glycogen, so that is, maybe 12 hours or so to 16 hours on the average human being. Again, most of it being stored in your liver. And then once that's exhausted, now your body starts going to the next level. So point number 3, now we're going to talk more about keto and ketosis. And we're also going to talk a little bit more about this, like growth hormone and things like that. Now, first, I want to start off with some of the benefits insulin-like growth factor. When you eat carbs, you're on like a 3 to 4 hour spike when your insulin's high. And when you're a kid, your growth hormone will still stay high because you're a kid and you're going through, the first 20 years of your life and you're actively growing constantly. So when the insulin goes up, your growth hormone will still stay up because you're growing. But as you stop growing and now you're in your 20s and then you're in your 30s and then even more as you get older, growth hormone starts, because you're no longer growing like you were when you were a kid and a teenager. So when you're in your 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and so on, the older you get, the more that your natural growth hormone now starts to decline. And then your body doesn't heal as fast as it used to. You have more aches and pains. You don't have as much energy as you did, like when you were a teenager or a kid, and it's just like boundless, unlimited energy because you have high growth hormone. So the thing is, as you get older, your growth hormone naturally declines. But what's great about simply by just not having carbohydrates and letting that glucose switch off by default, by just stop eating carbs. After the 3-4 hours is over, slowly your body is transitioning where the insulin's continuing to go down. Your insulin-like growth factor, as in the opposite, is starting to go up. And then what happens is around the 12 hours or so to 16 hours, there are many medical studies that show that you can have between a 1,200% to a 2,000% natural increase in this insulin-like growth factor just by stop eating carbs and then you switch to glycogen, which also, like again, the IGF-1 is switching you, so now your body has to get all your glucose from your fat stores, and of course glycogen's first. And then that's when you get that peak of IGF-1 between 12 and 16 hours. And now I need to explain, first of all, some of the benefits is that if you're an older person, you don't have to go to a doctor and get growth hormone shots and worry about how expensive it is to have the benefits of it, and then worry about, if there's any possible side effects, because they might have got that growth hormone, they grew in a laboratory, or they might have got it out of, from cows or something. But the other thing is, even if it's perfectly safe, is the insurance going to cover it, or are you going to have to pay out of pocket for the growth hormone shots? But guess what? You don't have to get anything from modern pharmaceutical companies. It's free. That's right. It's totally, completely free. Free. You just stop eating carbs. And between 12 and 16 hours, what will happen is you'll have this 1,200% to 2,000% increase in growth, and suddenly you get this energy boost. You get this even mental energy boost, and you feel in the zone. That is a totally natural and thing you can do just by understanding that there is this glucose on and off switch. And when you just stop eating carbs for a while, it by default switches to your fat stores and then IGF-1, and now you're in the zone. 12-16 hours from your last meal, you got this peak of growth hormone that helps your body heal faster, greatly increases your energy levels, but it also serves a specific purpose. Now, the purpose for it, and again, going back to like the logic, reasoning, and common sense of how God created us. So there's a number of stress responses in the body, like if you get too hot or if you get too cold, or for example, like not eating for a while. It's not a bad thing. It's, when I say stress, it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's like a way that your body is like an adaptation machine and constantly adapts to your present circumstances and situations and the time and seasons and the environment. Okay, just as a quick example, you have the pineal gland, which is behind, or some of these people call it the third eye, but it's basically a gland behind your skull, like where your two eyes are in the front, and then behind your forehead, there's this pineal gland, and they're connected with your eyes. What happens is that when there's daylight and there's all this light, okay, the pineal gland reads the information, the data coming from your eyes, and your eyes see all this light. So the pineal gland flips, again, like an on and off switch. It flips on and says, oh, hey, look, it's day. So it actually triggers a release of hormones that tells your body to wake up. And then guess what? When it's dark and it's really, really dark, the pineal gland also reads that from your eyes. Oh, it's dark. It must be, the sun must have gone down. It must be time to sleep. So the pineal gland switches off, and it actually does the opposite, and it basically triggers like melatonin and things like that to tell your body it's time to go to sleep. Wow. So you mean just by light or by darkness, I can flip this pineal gland switch on and off, and light activates it and helps me feel more and triggers a hormone release that tells me to wake up. But, hey, if you want to go to sleep, you probably should put an eye mask on, or you should just turn everything off and have total darkness and let the switch go off and let it trigger like melatonin and things like that to tell your body to go to sleep. That's exactly how it works. And your body has a whole bunch of switches like this all throughout your body. Well, this is, again, we're talking about the glucose on and off switch, and the opposite, okay, the insulin on one side and the IGF on the other. Now, what's the purpose for, just like we talked about, like with light? If there's light or there's darkness, well, it's light, the sun's probably up, it's time to wake up and get to work. Dark, okay, the sun's probably set, it's probably time to go to bed and rest. So there's logical purpose and design in how God created you. So it's the same thing. So what is the logic, reasoning, and discernment and common sense behind this on and off switch? Well, so again, let's say you haven't eaten carbs for a while. There's a lot of examples of, so for example, animals in the wild, like for example, wolves, they might only eat once or twice a week. You might have a variety of, whether it's a mountain lion or, a variety of animals, especially predators, that they might only eat once. They don't know when their next meal is going to be. They weren't created with the convenience of like, the wolf's just going to go in the convenience store. So the point though, is if they don't know when their next meal is, what happens is that, let's say that it's been so many hours and they haven't eaten. And then what happens is that they have the same type of insulin-like growth factor spike, and that growth factor, and they have the same kind of fat stores like glycogen, the moderate brown fat, and the visceral fat. So what happens with the same thing in their bodies when the IGF-1 increases and they haven't eaten for a while, when that spikes, what it does is it helps them to heal better. It helps, because, okay, we have to talk about what does IGF-1 do. Like we talked about, insulin tells your fat to store more fat, to store more glucose and get bigger, the fat tissue to get bigger. And it tells the muscles to burn carbs first. Well, what does insulin-like growth factor do? IGF, what it does is it actually does the opposite. It tells your fat stores to release. It tells your fat stores to open up, because now your body is completely getting all of its glucose from your fat stores. So your fat stores have to do the opposite. They have to now open up. And of course, your body's going to do the glycogen first. And then 12 to 16 hours later, when all the glycogen's gone, your body's then going to make another switch and go completely to that moderate and that visceral fat. Maybe 80-20 or something like that, the brown fat to the visceral fat. So when your body's switched and your IGF-1 is high, what also happens is that, okay, if it tells your fat stores to release energy, to release, glycogen and sugar, IGF-1 is basically like a key that like unlocks your fat stores. So you want to lose fat, you need to get your IGF-1 up, because that literally is like the key that opens them up. That's how your body actually accesses your fat. Oh, so it's easy to lose fat. Oh, okay. But that's the key. The next thing is, what does it do to your muscles? So the IGF-1, that growth hormone, again, just like when you're a kid and you get a bump or a bruise, but you're growing so fast, you just grow right through it and it just goes away most of the time. So same thing, and as you get older and your growth hormone's lower, your body doesn't heal as fast. Well, guess what? You get your IGF-1 up, you get your growth hormone up. Your growth hormone has that 1,200 to 2,000% spike. It actually helps your tissues heal, but it also helps boost your mental and physical performance, your muscles, your organs, especially your brain, and you get a brain boost. So the purpose of that is like let's say a wolf or like a mountain lion or something, they haven't eaten for a while. That is this boost of energy, because even though your body wants to switch to your fat stores and get all your energy and your glucose from your fat stores, it wants to also boost the performance and optimize the performance of your vital organs and muscles, but most especially your brain, because basically the animal has to figure out, okay, well, where am I going to get my next meal? So they get this, like what we would say, in the zone, 12, 16 hours, there's this huge growth hormone spike, and people actually, I get addicted to that feeling. I love it. I want it every single day, because it feels so good when you get to that point. And then you get this like several hour span where optimized brain function and clearer and faster brain function. And it really works. works. It's addicting, actually. And that's one of the greatest reasons I love doing it. I love doing intermittent fasting because I'm addicted to getting that growth hormone spike every single day, especially for the mental boost. But that's the logic behind it. So like if an animal out in the wild, they haven't eaten for a while, well, at some point it's like, hey, but the body wants to burn fat, but doesn't want to lose all your muscle mass. Because of course, that's, you have to have your muscles to live, to move, to fight, or to hunt, or, exactly. So your body doesn't want to lose muscle. I'm going to give an example real quick so that you understand that, like, so for example, I was watching a video about a man who it wasn't a 40-day fast, but he did a 44-day fast, complete fast, just water. And he did it with even doctor supervision where they weighed him all throughout the beginning to the end and all throughout at different intervals. And then they also checked his body mass index, his like muscle to fat ratio. And for some reason, after 40 days, he kept going for 4 more days. So after 44 days, he lost 40 pounds of fat and only lost 4 pounds of like muscle and like those like organ tissue. Now I want you to think about that. 44 days is a really, really, really long time to go without eating. And think about it. He only lost 4 pounds of muscle and body tissue, but he lost 40 pounds of fat and only 44 days, a long time to go. And wow, he only 4 pounds. That's incredible. It's a pound every 10 days. So the point there is that when the IGF-1 is up, it switches your body to release the fat stores, and it's like the key that unlocks your fat stores. But it is also the thing that growth factor helps to keep your muscle and your vital organ tissues, not just in your brain, to a higher level of optimum performance because of that stress response, because you're not eating. But the other thing is that it has great health benefits. It helps your body and muscle tissues heal faster, just like when you were a kid. And the other thing is that it helps to keep up your muscle and fat tissue. It helps so that you don't lose it. How could the guy go 44 days? And yes, he lost 40 pounds of fat, but he only lost 4 pounds of muscle. That's like a pound every 11 days. That's incredible, because IGF-1 helps you to lose fat, but it helps you to boost and maintain and even strengthen your muscles and organs and brain tissues while you're not eating, to keep up your muscles and everything. So it serves a really good purpose. So there is a logical order to it. And I just want to mention another thing about the liver and about growth is there's something called, an example I want to use is sharks. Now, sharks don't have arms, they don't have legs, and basically even their head and their body is just one torso, right? They don't even have like a neck. Their head and their body is just one, and then there's like a tail that moves back. So without arms and legs, and it just was one like head, body, and then there's a tail. The average, now the liver might be 4 or 5% or something the size of a human body. It might be, just a small percent, like 3 to 5% of the size of my total body weight. My liver is just a small fraction of how big my body is. But for a shark, the liver in a shark might be 20 to 25% of their body mass. And most sharks can go 3 months, 6 months. I've even read where they can even go like a year without eating. Think about, they store so much glycogen in their livers that are like these gigantic livers that are like a quarter of their whole body mass. So if a shark's 100 pounds, imagine a 25-pound liver. So they store so much glycogen and fat. That's just a really cool example. Like, wow. So this whole and the thing is too that even if you don't, now it's switched specifically by eating carbs, but your body is very resourceful, and your body can actually convert protein and convert some of that to glucose. That's right. So, but the point though is that your body, that this mechanism God put in our bodies, like this glucose on insulin or glucose off IGF-1 balance, it's not just in us, it's in animals throughout the animal kingdom, and there's a logical purpose, and you get great health benefits from the heightened growth hormone, and it's free, and you don't even have to have a doctor to do it. Skip a couple meals. So 12 to 16 hours, like that's not even a whole day, or getting more of it. And people do intermittent fast where they do like a 1 meal a day, or they only eat like a 2-hour window or 4-hour window, and they go 20 hours or 22 hours between meals because they want more growth hormone effects. They want more of that energy boost and healing effects, and more of that optimal mental and physical performance. Like, I love the mental boost I get from it. It's addicting. I want to do it every single day. It's free. Like, dude, just skip a couple meals. And then the other thing, and that's the other reason why you have people who are just like tired all the time, and they're just like, and then just keep eating and eating and eating. eating. It's not just that you're eating all the time. So I want to mention this too. This was not in my pre-writing, but I want to go on this too. And that's part of the thing, especially as you get older, that not only because constantly eating carbs and sugars constantly keeps your insulin up, which means it's going to constantly suppress that growth factor down. All the growth factor is doing is telling your body to switch and get your glucose from your fat store, but then it has these other health benefits. So you don't, like, who said your insulin has to be really high all the time? That's not true. Insulin serves a purpose, and when you're not eating carbs, you don't need it to be so high. That's foolishness. But the other thing is, just a couple things, is that not only do you get this great energy boost and like mental, physical optimization in your muscles and organs and brain function from the heightened growth factor. Another thing is that if you just keep eating all the time and eating 3 meals and snacks and you're constantly suppressing your growth hormone. Another thing is that when you're not eating, you get even more, not only do you let your stomach and your intestines like actually rest, because there's actually a tremendous amount of work. Like think about like if you have a generator and you put some gasoline in it and you turn it on and then there's all this there's smoke coming out of it. Like it's working really hard to burn that energy to produce that electricity for whatever you're using the generator. Well, you've got this digestive system generator, and every time you eat, you're also, what you're doing is you're turning on this whole digestive system, and then from your mouth having to produce like saliva and even digestive enzymes in your mouth as you chew, and then you're all that energy chewing, and then you swallow, and then in your stomach, now your stomach has to produce stomach acids and produce all of these different enzymes to break all these different things down, and then it has to go through all of these different feet. I mean, your small intestine is really, really, really long, and then there's this muscle action where the muscles are slowly like pushing and pushing and pushing things through that really long small intestine and then pushing them through your large intestine. So there's this huge amount of work that every time you eat, not only and you're eating those carbs and it's suppressing the growth hormone, but it's also activating where now for so many hours your body's going to have to put all this hard work in, from the chewing and the saliva to the enzymes and the stomach acid, digestive enzymes, and then all these hours and hours and hours of working and trying to absorb the nutrients out of food and slowly push it through all your intestines. That's a lot of work for your body to do. So sometimes by not eating, you're going to also feel better because like, hey, you're just letting your stomach and your intestines rest. You're letting let the generator like rest for a while. The other thing is that every time you eat, when the food gets broken down and goes into your intestines, what happens is then you have like this excess blood, and what happens is all the excess blood in your body has to go to your intestines because you're eating all this food. So your excess of blood has to be around your intestines, because when your body absorbs those nutrients and carbs, proteins, some of the fats go through a different route, but some of them, like coconut oil, they do go through the same route into your bloodstream. And then your blood has to now absorb all these nutrients, which means then your blood gets thicker. So that's where we say your blood pressure goes up, because now your blood just had to absorb all of these nutrients and all these foods that you just ate. And then that's why like you eat a big meal and then all of a sudden it's like maybe for the next half hour or something like like maybe you kind of get like a brain fog or like because there's a lot less blood flowing into your brain. So yes, there's some nutrients, and you're just getting like maybe a boost of nutrients in your blood, but a whole bunch more of that blood, your blood pressure just went up and your blood just got a lot thicker, and a lot more of the blood's having to be redirected to your intestines to absorb the nutrients. So that's why you feel that initial like brain fog after a big meal. But on the opposite end, just like you get like a brain fog when you eat a big meal, well, guess what? It's the opposite when you don't eat, when you skip some meals and you let your digestive system take a break. You let your digestive system rest and actually clean itself out, and you're not constantly eating 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day. That puts a lot of stress on your body, constantly having to do all that work to constantly break all those meals down. But if you skip some meals and you do some intermittent fasting or some prolonged fasting, not only does you give it a rest, but you let your digestive system clean itself out a little bit, and then that energy that your body spends running your digestive system, it can redirect that energy to the rest of your vital organs and brain function. And the other thing is that when you skip some meals and you do intermittent fasting, not only your IGF-1 goes up and you're giving your digestive system a break and giving it some rest, and then it's redirecting that energy it would spend running your digestive generator to other parts of your body, but it also redirects your excess blood flow. So now your blood pressure automatically goes down. That's right, you don't need to take blood pressure medication. You just skip a meal. Wow. All you have to do is stop eating. You don't have to eat constantly all the time. So just skip a meal or two. Your blood pressure will go down. And what happens is then that excess of blood that had to be around your intestines when you were eating, that excess blood can now just go to other places like your organs and especially your brain. That's right. So now more blood flow is going to your brain, and that not only you're getting that IGF-1 boost of 1200 to 2000%, but then there's more blood, there's less energy being consumed running your digestive generator, and you're giving that a break. But then that energy and that excess blood flow is now being redirected to your other organs and your brain. So all together with the IGF-1 boost and the excess blood flow now being able to go to other parts of your body, you get what I call in the zone. Get at 12, 16 hours, you eventually even at 20 hours, you eventually will start having more optimal brain and organ and muscle function, and you get in the zone. Get these periods of time where your creativity and your intelligence is just boost, and it gets addicting. Like, I want to do the one meal a day, or I want to do, like some people do, they'll talk about intermittent fasting, like doing a 12-hour, eating for 12-hour window and then not eating for 12, but that's almost nothing. That produces almost no impact whatsoever. But some people will do let's say an 8-hour or 6-hour or even a 2 to 4 hour window. Let's say where every day somebody will fast 16 hours every day, and then they will only eat during an 8-hour window. Or somebody will say, okay, I'm going to do a 6-hour intermittent fast, so I'm going to not eat for 18 hours every day, and then I'm going to eat only all my food, same amount of food. I'm just going to eat it all over a 6-hour window, or even a 4-hour, there's a 12-12, which I don't even bother wasting time doing because it's almost no impact. But I would say at least do a 16-hour fast to an 8-hour window, an 18-hour fast to a 6-hour window, or even doing a 20-hour fast to a 4-hour window. And that's good because you can get a couple meals in over 4 hours. You could eat at 12 noon and eat again at 4 o'clock and get 3:30 by the end of the meal, the 4 hours. Well, you can go 5 hours. You do a 19.5 or 24, and you can get a couple meals in. But then there's the one meal a day, which is the OMAD, or 1 meal a day diet, where mainly you're going to go maybe 23-hour fast and then between meals and just have a 1-hour window where you can eat as much as you want, or you're going to do maybe a 22-hour fast to a 2-hour window. And whether it's a 1 hour, 2 hour, that's pretty much still one meal. And so that's really popular. But even just doing a 20 over 4 or a 19 over 5, and there's a lot of pro athletes now. Almost all the pro athletes in basketball, football, baseball, hockey, many different sports, soccer, they pretty much almost all practice intermittent fasting because it's a really easy way to get that natural growth hormone boost and heightened mental and physical ability and performance. And it's free and it's built into your body. You just have to stop eating carbs and just do some intermittent fasting. And it's really, really simple and easy. And in fact, once you start doing it and your body heals faster, recovers faster, you get these big performance, mental and emotional and physical boosts. You feel so much better, and you even feel cleaner because you're giving your digestive system a break. So you don't get the brain fog like when you eat a big meal. You don't get all of the the tiredness from constantly eating, and you give your digestive system a break. So you feel cleaner, you feel lighter, and you feel faster, and you feel an energy boost, recover and heal faster, and you have a mental boost. All of that just by default, by going so many hours without eating carbs and doing intermittent fasts, like a 16-8 or an 18-6 or a 19-5 or a 24, or even just doing a 1 meal a day, the OMAD. You get these huge growth hormone boosts, and you feel so much better, so good. And then guess what? It's easier to lose weight because after that 12 to 16 hour period, what happens? Your IGF-1 is up really high at 12 hours or 16 hours, which what does that mean? Again, that's the key that unlocks your fat store. So if you want to burn fat, you got to actually get to that point where your body it's not just total carbohydrates in and total carbohydrates out. You actually got to get to that point where you take that IGF-1 key and you unlock your fat stores. It's natural. It's normal. It's a natural function in your body, and it really, really, really works. So we haven't even started talking about ketosis yet, but I want to mention a couple more things. There is also there's what's called ghrelin. So just like we talked about growth hormone, not only it's the IGF-1 that just naturally is the opposite and the opposite thing that balances out insulin versus insulin growth factor. The other thing is that when your stomach is empty, let's say you skip a meal or skip a couple meals and you start to get hungry and your stomach is empty, your stomach, believe it or not, actually produces what's called the hunger hormone. Your stomach produces a hormone called ghrelin, and ghrelin is the hunger hormone, and not only does it tell your body, again, it's a hormone, a chemical message that like your stomach is like direct mailing out to all the cells in your body, and it's telling your whole body, hey, the stomach's empty, I'm hungry, feed me. But the other thing is that just like that same thing with like when the insulin goes down, the IGF-1 goes up, which is your insulin growth factor, and you get these big growth factor boosts. Well, guess what? At the same time, your ghrelin is released when you get to that point after like a meal or two, you start feeling hungry, your stomach's empty, it produces ghrelin. And one of the things ghrelin does, not only does it tell your body you're hungry, but ghrelin goes to your pituitary gland, which is like your master endocrine gland. And what it does is it triggers a huge, massive release in growth hormone. So literally, when your stomach is empty, it triggers a ghrelin hunger hormone, and the ghrelin also directly triggers the pituitary to release a big, like dump a bunch of growth hormone into your bloodstream, because it's literally, hey, we the stomach's empty, we need to eat, we need higher mental, physical performance to get the next meal. Oh, okay. So, and I want you to understand how big of a growth hormone boost this is. There's actually something called a SARM, S-A-R-M. And there's this, basically there's this SARM called, I'm just using it as an example. It's called ibutamoren, MK677. Now it's a like experimental, what's called SARM, and basically there's a lot of different kinds of SARMs. There's like these experimental drugs, and basically SARM is, the ibutamoren is made to be just like ghrelin. And what it does is people actually buy this MK677 ibutamoren because let's say they're trying to lift weights, they want to get a growth hormone boost, so they actually can take ibutamoren, and it does the same thing as ghrelin. It releases a big growth hormone boost. But guess what? It does the same thing like ghrelin, and it gets people hungry. So some people don't like to take it because they get like really hungry and like, oh, and then they get so yeah, they get the growth hormone, but they get the hunger too. But the hunger's a good thing. So when you're intermittent fasting, when you feel hungry, that's a good thing, because you know what? You're getting a big growth hormone boost. Your stomach's producing ghrelin, and you're getting a lot of health benefits out of that. One more thing I just want to mention is there's also this hormone that, just like the stomach produces ghrelin, right? There's something else called leptin. Leptin is a hormone that's like kind of like an opposite in balance to ghrelin. And leptin is actually a hormone produced by your fat stores. That's right, not the glycogen, which is the short term, but like your brown fat, like that moderate store fat, and even the visceral. And basically your brown fat and visceral fat, the more you have of it, they produce it's also called adipose tissue. And basically your fat stores, what they do is they release a hormone called leptin. Now leptin, if you have a small amount of fat stores, if you have just, if you're a pretty skinny person, then you would have a very small amount of leptin. Now, so, nothing really happens. But if you have like excessive amounts of fat and you start to get too fat and you have too much fat stores, your body knows, and again, in the logic God created your body, if you get too fat, your leptin is proportional to the amount of fat you have. So if you have very low fat stores, you have very low leptin. If you have very high fat, you have very high leptin. Well, in high amounts, leptin also triggers your body, and leptin basically says, it's like a chemical message that your adipose tissue is direct mailing out to all the cells in your body, and it's telling your body, like if you have too much fat, like if you have small amounts of fat, it's just a little bit of leptin goes out, there's not much fat, so it doesn't really do anything. But when there's high fat, it produces high leptin, and that tells your body, hey, I'm too fat. That's right. If you're too big, if you're too fat, you'll have high leptin, and leptin will tell your body, hey, I'm too fat, stop eating, stop being hungry. And it actually helps counterbalance ghrelin. So people who have obesity or have too much fat, they'll have high leptin, and leptin also will make you feel uncomfortable. So literally being too fat, you can literally get to a point where your fat tissue is trying to stop you, stop eating. There's too much fat. And you'll literally get to a point where you're starting to feel uncomfortable and your body doesn't want to eat. But the problem is a lot of people just continue, they become leptin resistant, they ignore it, and they just keep eating anyways. But it can cause someone to feel very uncomfortable. But it actually helps to tell your stomach, hey, stop eating because we're too fat, we don't need more food. But see how there's all these balances in the body? It's amazing, isn't it? So this is the logic that God created your body by. And not only does you stop eating carbs, your IGF-1 naturally goes up, but your stomach produces ghrelin, the hunger hormone, that also greatly boosts your growth hormone. And if you do have too much, I just want to throw that in there. It's just something good to know, especially if a lot of people are trying to lose weight. So I just want to throw that in there too. So let's go to the next point. So the next point is going to actually be keto. Okay, so in this track, proceed to talk about ketosis, and then we can go into autophagy, and then I'll still mention there's an MTOR/autophagy balance or switch in your body. Now, so again, let's say you eat your last meal and you had some carbs to go past the threshold to get an insulin response. You have an insulin spike 4 hours. Around 12 to 16 hours, your body will switch over to glycogen from glucose, and now you have that full-on IGF-1 spike between 12 to 16 hours. And then as you run out glycogen, then your body fully switches over to more moderate fat and more visceral fat stores. Now you have switched into what's called ketosis. Now ketosis is basically when, after you've burned up your short-term glycogen stores, when your body actually starts releasing the energy stored up in moderate and visceral fat, which is your emergency fat. As those types of fat begin to release their stored energy, they release it in what's called ketones. So again, to go back to the analogy of like a car and switching gears as you drive, and of course, like our eating food, basically switching the gears as you drive, of course, that's the purpose of a car, is to drive and go from one place to another. The purpose of your metabolism is to basically burn energy, and your metabolism basically works and body creates like body tissues and things like that, and burns fuel. Now, when you eat, of course, you're basically like in drive. When as you switch to like your glycogen, you're more like in neutral, and then switch into ketosis, it's more like your digestive system goes into like park, like if you're not eating, like you're fasting. And we're going to talk about your ketosis. And the ketosis is basically like a hybrid car. So instead of just burning glucose, your body has another form of energy it can burn when it's completely, using in the analogy of a hybrid, like you put gas and it burns gas in the combustion engine. Also has a battery stored energy, and when you switch to electric, it's cleaner and basically easier vehicle to use. And that's the same way, is that your body is switching off of glucose and switching to ketosis, fat burning, and your body is releasing the energy from your stored moderate and brown fat and your visceral fat. You're in ketosis, and your fat is releasing ketones. And ketones is a cleaner, easier to use fuel for both your brain and your body tissues. Now, glucose needs insulin to kind of pull the glucose into your cells. So insulin is important when you're burning glucose because it actually opens the door and gets the glucose in. Without insulin, your cells might not be able to even burn so it needs the insulin. But with ketones, you just go into ketosis, and ketones just can go right into your cells, right into your brain cells, and it's a much cleaner, simpler kind of fuel to use. Now, and there's a number of medical studies and examples of people, let's say somebody with long-term mental handicap, and then after a few months, or after years, they try all kinds of different things, nothing works, but then they switch them into a keto diet, and they get them off sugar glucose, and then 3 months into a ketone diet, they actually start, when nothing else worked, and they get into ketones, suddenly, now their brain actually starts healing a little bit, and then they actually see marked difference in those mental handicaps. There's amazing things that happen with ketones. The ketones is a better fuel for your brain, and it's a better, cleaner fuel for your body. It's easier for your cells to burn. But again, ketosis just means that you're fully in fat burning mode. You have switched off the temporary glucose and the 3 to 4 hour insulin spike. You've gone past the 12 to 16 hour full on IGF-1 spike and basically burned up all your glycogen. Now the next step in that progression, let's say you go beyond that, now your body is switched into ketosis, and the cells in your body are fully dependent on the energy from your fat stores, and your fat stores release energy in the ketones, and that's all ketosis is. Now we're going to loop back and talk about the keto diet, but that's basically what ketosis is. You're in fat burning mode past the short-term glycogen, and you're fully into that moderate brown fat and that long-term emergency storage visceral fat. Now, so that's basically pretty easy to understand. Then even going beyond that, your body starts to do something because you're getting carbohydrates, basically like an alternative to glucose. You're getting ketones, so it's giving you energy. But the thing is that let's say you're still not eating and you're still fasting, and you went beyond that 12-hour to maybe that 12-hour threshold, and you've burned up all the glycogen. You're on ketone fuel hybrid, but your body still needs some protein. So how does it get its protein? So along with and even beyond ketosis, the next step after that, which is basically like switching your metabolism into reverse. Instead of drive, neutral, or park, now you're going full on in reverse. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that basically instead of building body tissues, so what it does, your body has a way of categorizing the tissues in your body and basically like tagging cells and identifying cells as like old cells, dead cells, damaged cells, or even cancer cells. And your body has a way of tagging these cells. And then what happens is you go into the next step beyond ketosis, which is called autophagy. Autophagy means self-eating. So basically to get your protein, that there's protein in your body, but what it does is it starts going into like a recycling, deep cleaning mode. And it doesn't just take any cells in your body. It starts getting those old cells, dead cells, damaged cells, cancer cells, and it tags those, and it starts breaking those down and actually recycling them. So literally your body can take those old, dead, damaged, and cancer cells and actually consume them and break them apart and actually extract sugar and minerals and protein, amino acids from those old, dead, damaged, and cancer cells, and actually just starts like going into a deep cleaning, recycling mode and cleaning itself out of cells that have accumulated over the years and the decades, and just starts recycling. So that's like your reverse mode. That's like you're switching your metabolism from just drive, neutral, or park. Now you're going full on in reverse, and it's a very good thing. So because it's recycled. So if you think about just like on the outside of your body, you could have like a pimple or a zit or just skin tags and things like that accumulate over time, or scars, tissue. Well, the same thing is that your body, if you think about it, your body also has the equivalent of like scar tissue and like skin tags and things like that, but on the inside of your body. On the inside, you call them tumors or tumor cells, or just, your body just over decades accumulates, sometimes they're just old, dead, damaged, or even cancer cells, like tumors that just accumulate. And your body, and if you just keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating forever, it's like, well, you're not giving your body a break to clean itself out. Sometimes you got to take a break, like once a year, and deep clean your house. Well, when was the last time you deep cleaned your body? And think about things like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease or dementia, when there can be like an accumulation of old brain cells, dead brain cells, damaged brain cells that just, of different things like that just accumulate in the brain. And after 60, 70 years, someone can start to have, again, like we call it Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, things like that. Well, when was the last time exactly, have they ever done fasting? Well, you need to do some recycling. You need to do some deep cleaning inside your body and let your body tag those old, dead, damaged, and cancer cells and recycle them. And that's how you activate the recycling process. That's how is autophagy. And this starts around somewhere, many studies I've read, somewhere around maybe 16 hours to 18 hours or so into like an intermittent fast. Again, it's still less than a day. You can start to activate an increased level of autophagy, this deep cleaning, recycling, 16 to 18 hours in. And that's what's really good about doing like the OMAD 1 meal a day diet fast, or doing like a 4-hour window, because you're going past 16 and 18 hours. So at least you're giving yourself a few hours to do some of that deep cleaning, recycling before you break it and open up your eating. It's a really good thing. Now the thing is, autophagy always is happening. Okay, so even when you exercise and you get like vigorous exercise, you actually also activate autophagy. Because think about it, like you break down your muscles and then you have like dead, damaged cells when you break your muscles down. So when you exercise, you also activate an increased level of autophagy, and then your body has to take those broken down muscles and then break them down and recycle those cells and then rebuild new ones. And that's why that's why exercise also has been linked to increase growth hormone, because you can also activate the same process like in fasting with lots of exercise. By exercising, you're damaging you're breaking down your muscles. It activates autophagy, recycles and cleans those cells, dead, damaged cells out. And usually you do a lot of exercise, a lot of studies show that you can get some growth hormones from that, because you got to rebuild those cells. Well, the same kind of thing happens when you fast. When you fast, your body goes through recycling to deep clean those old, dead, damaged cancer cells and breaks them apart and gets the protein it needs from those cells. Now again, the example of the guy did the 44-day fast, and even being, constantly being weighed in intervals and BMI tests and losing 44 pounds in 44 days, but 40 pounds was fat and only 4 pounds was muscle. If you think that 4 pounds was actual like body tissue, like muscles and other, organ tissues, but the body's going to prioritize that 4 pounds was like the oldest of the cells, the most damaged of the cells, the dead cells of that in that guy's body. After being, I think he's at 45 45 years old or so, 50 years old. So the point though is that that's just recycling and deep cleaning out your body. So it has great health benefits as well. And then with that, I'm going to mention some of the worldwide fasting clinics. There is a clinic in Europe that's been around since in the 1800s at some point. And the doctor who started that had a severe arthritis that they couldn't heal it with anything at the time. So he did I think a 3-week fast, and after trying all kinds of other things, it wouldn't work. So he basically gave up and he started fasting, and 3 weeks in, it healed his arthritis because he went into such a deep cleaning recycling mode that it fixed itself. Now, there's another fasting clinic like this, I think it's in California, and they do the same kind of thing, that pretty much all their patients are people who have been through the medical industry. They've been all kinds of other treatments and therapies, medications, et cetera, even surgeries, and the modern medical field could not heal them, and they're at the end of the rope. They have no alternative, nothing else works. The medical field doesn't have any other answers, and then they go to this fasting clinic, and the average person maybe fast for 3 weeks with all people with all types of different diseases and cancers and things like that, and virtually all of them get healed by doing these long water fasts. And literally, so there are literally fasting clinics that you can go to actually under doctor supervision to actually help you to go. And so the autophagy, deep cleaning, recycling, it literally works. And that's why even in nature, there's many animals that when they get sick, they will stop eating. And of course they're animals, so they don't know anything intellectual, but it is programmed into their behavior and into their DNA, and subconsciously they know when they're sick or they're injured, they need to stop eating, because you get this huge growth hormone spike, and then your body eventually goes into ketosis and into autophagy, and your body cleans and recycles itself out. And with the growth hormone spike, that helps spawn a lot of brand new cells to be created to replace those dead, damaged, and broken cells, so your body actually heals itself. Amazing. And that's why even a story in the Bible talks about Moses, about how after he did these 40-day fasts in his old age, his health and his vitality, his strength of his youth was restored to him, he was a young man. That's in the Bible. So modern science is just now catching up and realizing that fasting has all these growth hormone increases, again from 1,200 to 2,000%, and then you go through these autophagy recycling modes. Literally, God put these mechanisms in your body. They're already there. You just have to learn how to activate them. And then some of the other things is that there are obesity-driven diseases that pretty much cannot exist in the human body if you regularly intermittent fast or regularly do prolonged fast. If you think about it like acid reflux. So acid reflux that excess acid is only going to accumulate if you just keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating. If you take a break and you let your body clean itself out, you're not going to have acid reflux problems. Same thing with leaky gut or hardening of the arteries. Think about hardening of the arteries. There's all this plaque and stuff builds up inside your arteries. Well, that can only happen if you just keep eating all the time. Because if you did a 2-week fast, well, guess what? Or even intermittent fasting, if you start eating 1 meal a day and you start doing that for a month, a couple months, as your body every day is going into ketosis and going into because remember, IGF-1 unlocks the fat store. So and then when you go into ketosis, you're going into fat burning mode, you're lowering, because you're not eating, your blood pressure's going down. Blood pressure's only going to be high when you eat all the time. If you stop eating, it has to go, because exactly. So your body will clean the stuff that's accumulated in your arteries. Your body will clean that out. So whether you're doing a lot of intermittent fasting, longer period of time, where you say, you know what, and you just go into a 3-day fast or 7-day fast or something, water fast, eventually your body's going to have to clean it out, because it's going to go into recycling mode and clean everything else out. So it's going to clean that out too. And the same thing with something called fatty liver. Now remember, we talked about glycogen builds up in your liver. So, well, of course somebody's going to have fatty liver if they just keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating or stop it. But it is impossible to have fatty liver if you'll just fast. If you start doing 1 meal a day, or a 20-hour fast intermittent every day and a 4-hour eating window, there's pro athletes like DK Metcalf for the Seattle Seahawks. This physical phenomenon, just incredible physical athleticism and size and strength and speed. And he does a 20 or 4, and he's only 25 or something like that. But athletes know this is some of the best things you can do to strengthen your health and get those natural growth hormones and strengthen your body. It really works. But whether it's acid reflux, leaky gut, hardening of the arteries, fatty liver, those things really can't exist if you're on a regular intermittent fasting and fasting schedule. They only exist when you don't stop eating. Now, another thing to mention is I'm going to go into something about MTOR. I kind of skipped over that, but now that we're on the topic of autophagy, I want to mention that, because just like you have this, testosterone, estrogen, like back and like 1-0 switch in your DNA, and it's back and forth, just like your pineal gland. Like I talked about earlier, when you see light, it switches on, tells your body to releases hormones, tells your body you're awake, and then when it's dark, it switches off and releases like melatonin and things like that tells your body to go to sleep. Now, so there's lots of these switches in the body. So just like there's the glucose switch, and you eat fresh carbs, it switches on, you release insulin, and that tells your body you have fresh glucose. But if you by default just don't eat glucose for 4 hours or several hours, it by default goes back to 0, and it goes to the insulin-like growth factor on the opposite end of that balance, IGF-1, and you switch from the fresh glucose to your stored fat cell. Now, there's something else called MTOR. Now, we talked about what happens when you eat carbohydrates, and there's this glucose on and off switch. But there's also something that happens when you eat protein. When you eat, again, if it's just like a gram or 2 or something like that, it's not going to happen. But most people, and again, it depends on your height, weight, body tissue composition, your BMI, your ratio of muscle to fat, things like that. Everybody has a different threshold, certain amount. One person, it might be 20 grams. An older person, bigger person, taller person might be 30 grams. Of course, if it's like a child, it's probably something a lot smaller. But basically, there's this MTOR / autophagy switch or balance. And what happens is just like and that's also part of like your, again, this analogy, metaphor of like shifting gears in your metabolism. When you're in drive, let's say you eat protein and you have 30 grams of protein in one meal. It's not about how much protein you had for the day. Your body doesn't do that. It's actually by like how much you eat at a single setting. And let's say you sit down and you have a bunch of protein and you have maybe 30 grams. It also depends on the quality of protein, but I'm going to make a different audiobook on the science of protein. But let's say you have 30 grams, 35 grams of like steak or whatever. Now what happens, let's say you pass that threshold, what happens is then your body, this MTOR pathway is activated that tells your body that there is like an excess of fresh available protein, and protein is composed of amino acids. So your body now has an excess of fresh protein and amino acids. So it's going to do the same thing. Like with insulin, it tells your fat stores to store fat. Well, you eat a bunch of protein, your body's going to activate this mTOR pathway to store that protein. But how does your body store protein? It doesn't have like a storage. What it really does is it activates protein synthesis, and the mTOR pathway starts absorbing. So all the like your muscles and organs, they start taking in that protein and converting it into muscle mass and body tissue. So along with just lifting weights or something, or resistance training to try to build muscles, the actual way your body builds muscles primarily is not just, yes, you got to exercise, but it does it through eating protein. And when you pass that threshold, 25 or 35 grams, and again, it's different for your height, your weight, your body mass, and even you might need a higher amount of protein per meal as you get older. So you pass that threshold, you eat that protein, it actually will do like a 3 to 4 hour spike, just like insulin spikes for 3 to 4 hours. It'll activate the mTOR pathway for 3 to 4 hours. And mTOR basically is taking in that protein and trying to, your muscles, but any of your organs, and trying to convert and synthesize that protein into body tissue to actually create body tissues like muscles. Now, that's why I mention this, because there is another pathway for protein. Again, insulin versus IGF-1 is like the balance, the pendulum swinging back on your like glucose on and off switch. And this is like your protein on and off switch. And when you eat protein, it activates mTOR for 3 to 4 hours. And then as it uses up that protein, what happens is then as it switches back off, by default, when it switches off, and let's say you haven't had protein in a while, that's when it goes back into autophagy, because your body needs the protein, but if you're not eating it, it's going to have to recycle it from old, dead, damaged cells in your body. So that's what happens, is that same thing, like as if you stop eating carbs for so many hours, eventually it'll switch off from your insulin will go down, and it'll switch to the IGF-1 by default. Same thing, if you stop eating protein for an extended amount of time, it's going to switch into autophagy. Now, of course, you want to do autophagy in more of a controlled setting and more like an intermittent fast, things like that, because, where you're not eating protein at all, and your body's just, and you're going through that fasting cycle, again, glucose to glycogen, and then you get the IGF-1 spike, then you switch into ketosis, then you switch into autophagy. Because of course, if you're not doing it controlled and you're just like not eating healthy, and let's say you're having lots of carbs, but you're just not eating protein, then you can go into other things where where you can basically just start, it's called atrophy, where you could just start your body could just start breaking down muscles and things like that, and that's not good. That's not the way to do it. But in true intermittent fasting and prolonged fasting, it's better to just don't eat anything. So you keep your growth hormone, your IGF-1 high, so you keep your growth hormone high, and you switch into autophagy. And just like the guy with the 44-day fast I talked about, he only lost 4 pounds of muscle and lost 40 pounds of fat. But that's because he did a strict fast. If he was just constantly breaking it maybe every day, a couple times a day, but still not really getting very much protein at all, he could have lost a lot more, and that's called atrophy. You don't want to go into atrophy. Atrophy is never good. But autophagy is very good, and you just do it on a controlled fast, and you're not cheating on it when nobody's looking and things like that. Keep your growth hormone up so that way, as your body's recycling itself, you're not losing muscle mass and things like that. You're keeping your muscle mass up. And again, that's a benefit of the IGF-1. So keep your carbs down to 0. I understand if I have a drink like this lemon drink, and it's got 2 or 3 grams of carbohydrates in it, and it's almost nothing. I mean, come on, 6 or just a few calories for the day is nothing. But you just want to make sure that you don't go into atrophy, that you go into autophagy. Autophagy is very good. Atrophy is never. But again, there's this MTOR autophagy balance. So these are these 2 drive modes. That as you eat food and you get carbs, it turns on that glucose switch, and you switch to fresh glucose, and your body releases insulin. You eat protein, your body activates MTOR and you get past that threshold. You eat enough protein in one sitting, and your body activates this MTOR protein synthesis pathway, and you start taking that excess protein and synthesizing it into muscle tissue and body tissue. Now, as you start fasting again, to go over this, let's say, both of them spike for 3 to 4 hours. As they start to go down, and then you still haven't ate anything, and now it's 5 hours, 6 hours, both the insulin and the mTOR start being sharply declining and reducing, and then eventually, over those 12 to 16 hours, your body switches first into the IGF-1 mode, and you get the growth hormone spike, and then as you burn up your glycogen, you go fully into ketosis, so you're getting all of your energy from your fat stores, and then you're also fully out of mTOR and you're into autophagy. And now your body starts getting any protein that it needs by recycling it from old, dead, damaged, and cancer cells. And then now, by the time you're 16 hours, 18 hours into this intermittent fast, you've gone even beyond just the IGF-1 spike, and you've gone into ketosis, full fat burning mode, and now you're even in autophagy. And even if it's just a few hours, if you do a 20-hour fast and only eat over a 4-hour window, and you do that, at least you got into autophagy for a few hours every day. So it's going to help you live a longer life and help you have better health. Now, so these are things that happens, but also I want to mention that because I also want to mention the keto diet. Now, there is a way to kind of hack the system where you can go into a keto diet, and that is where you're still eating food, but you can stay in ketosis. And the way to do that is basically, now you have to eat protein and fats, so it is going to switch you automatically out of autophagy, because when you eat protein, they're switches. So you're either in insulin mode, where you ate fresh carbs, or when you stop eating carbs for a while, you switch into insulin. Like growth factor is the opposite. It switches your body to stored fat. If you eat the protein and you switch to mTOR, okay, great. But when after so many hours and you're not eating any more protein, you switch out of that and you switch to autophagy. It's one of the other. You're always going to be in either one state or the opposite. Now, with the keto diet, though, the way to get benefits of ketosis and long-term and increased fat burning is basically, even without intermittent fasting, you could actually eat 3 meals a day. But what if you ate a diet with only basically proteins and good healthy fats, and you had almost no carbs whatsoever? A tiny bit of carbs here and there. Again, you just don't want to go past the threshold. So if you have a whole meal and there's a little bit of broccoli, or celery has almost no calories whatsoever. If you have just a very, very small amount, like a whole meal, and you're only getting 2 or 3 grams or something of carbs, you're under your threshold. So you didn't get an insulin response, so your body's staying in that IGF-1 mode. So you could eat 3 meals a day and still continuously be in this IGF-1 mode, fat burning mode, real 1,200 to 2,000% spike in growth hormone. And so you get all these benefits continuously by doing the keto diet, because you're just not activating that switch. You're not eating the carbs to pass the threshold that turns on the insulin. You're having basically an almost no or even completely no carb diet and keeping the switch in IGF-1 mode. And then you're just eating fats and proteins. Now, yes, you're switching out of autophagy and you're switching into MTOR, which converts protein into muscle synthesis and helps you build muscle, but you're staying in the health benefits of keto in that hybrid mode where you're using this alternative fuel source, which is much better for your brain, better, cleaner, simpler, easier fuel to use for your muscles and your body. There is a little bit of a side effect, and sometimes they call it like the keto flu or things like that. They have nicknames, but sometimes when you're in the keto diet, and sometimes people just have, a hard time getting off of glucose. Sometimes they'll have a little bit of like keto depression or something like that, where they just don't, they get kind of irritable or they don't feel. And of course, if, the fact is, you got to judge by your own health, and sometimes if you get in like a really severe, physical issues or something, like you don't have to do keto for the rest of your life. You don't have to say, well, I'm going to do keto and that's it, and that's all sure. No, you could, just like if you do intermittent fasting, or let's say if you do keto for, you could do keto for 5 days. You could say, okay, I'm going to go keto Monday through Friday, and then I'm going to switch back off keto on Saturday and Sunday. So it's the same thing. Keto is just a short-term solution, or even if it's like for months or for a season of your life, it's never really meant to be like a permanent thing. It doesn't mean carbs are bad or carbs are evil. It just means that there's these greater health benefits. So sometimes you might want to take a week or even months and just say, you know what, especially if somebody needs to lose weight, but of course they don't want to do a complete fast, and they don't want to like completely fast and possibly lose a little bit of muscle tissue, especially if they're older. Okay, I want to keep up my muscle mass, but I want to, I still want to be able to eat something, but I want the health benefits of keto, and I want to stay in fat burning mode because let's say they're overweight and they need to lose a good amount of weight, but it might take months, it might take a year to lose all the weight that they need. Okay, well, that's the perfect person who should say, well, you know what, I should go on a keto diet for 6 months or for a year so that they stay in fat burning mode. Because think about it, that's what keto is. It's fat burning. You are completely switched over to getting all your energy from brown fat and your moderate store fat and your visceral fat. If you're in keto, you will lose weight, and you could still have protein and good healthy fats, and maybe like a, basically no carb, vegetable or spices and herbs. Like you could still put onions on it, you could still put celery on it and things like that, and you're basically getting almost no or even zero carbs, but you're still filling up with protein and good healthy fats, which are the building blocks which your body's made of, and you could still stay in that keto fat burning mode and get the additional health benefits and keep your IGF-1 super high, 1200 to 2000%. So you get huge health benefits out of it. So keto might be something you might want to do for a season, especially if you need to lose weight or if you just need to get your body healthy. So that's why I waited to the end to talk about the MTOR and the autophagy switch, and then because I wanted to specifically kind of circle back and talk about autophagy and talk about keto and talk about the keto diet. But basically those are like if you have two, again, the shifting gears in your metabolism, if you had two different like drive 1 and drive 2, that's like your insulin or insulin-like growth factor switch, like drive 1, and then let's say you have this other drive mode, which is like protein or autophagy. When you eat, it activates both of those drive modes, and then eventually as you stop eating, they switch off, and then you switch into like neutral, and then into like IGF-1 spike, you switch into PARC, which is let's say your ketosis, and then you switch, and then you fully switch into like reverse, which is like autophagy. But the cool thing about it is it's basically kind of like a hack, like the young people would say. When you do the keto diet, you continue to get the benefits of really high IGF-1 and the cleaner, easier to use keto fuel, and even the brain benefits of being on a keto diet, and you just have like a protein and good fat diet and almost no carbs. You could just stay keto. And of course, it's still not meant to be a permanent thing. It's still a season, like a season in your life, or you could just do it for a few days or even weeks or months. But those are some of the things I wanted to talk about, some of the benefits of like intermittent fasting. And again, whether you do like a 16-8 or an 18-6 or even a 19-5 or a 20/4, which is maybe my favorite. But then if you just do like a full, OMAD diet, 1 meal a day, and you just eat for like an hour or two, and that's it. But then there's prolonged fasting going beyond that. There's what's called Daniel fasting, like just doing like vegetables, things like that. And then there is the keto diet, which is again kind of like a hacking your metabolism, and you're just not having the carbs and keeping your IGF-1, staying in fat burning keto, but you're still having protein and good fats. I mean, dude, you could still eat like a steak or a nice piece of chicken or a bunch of eggs for an omelet in the morning and still be in keto and still get all these extra health benefits. So, but it's not meant to be a permanent thing, or like you have to hate carbs and just do keto. That's not a good understanding. It's just a temp. You years, but you don't have to do that for the rest of your life. Carbs aren't. But thank you again I went through all of this with intermittent fasting and talking about shifting gears in your metabolism. I did mention about the omnivore diet a little bit, and basically it's just it's just common sense, just switching almost completely off processed foods and trying just to go back to whole, natural, either plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, peppers, onions, mushrooms, etc., or going to whole, like animal-based foods, whether it's beef or chicken, eggs, whatever it is, and trying just to avoid processed foods and added chemicals, and especially the excess of corn and sugar in the American diet. and keeping away from sodas, and again, think about it, the juice aisle, the soda aisle, the cereal aisle, the pasta section, the chips and cookies and cracker section, the snack cake section. There are so much of the store. It's mainly all just like wheats and sugars and corn syrup and stuff like that. It's, oh my gosh. So it's really important to learn how your metabolism works and how your body actually functions. And no matter what kind of food you're going to eat, it's really about, is it carbs, fats, and or proteins, and understand how when you eat those things and you pass those thresholds, what mode your body switches into, and how to manage that gear shifter in your metabolism. And that's going to change your life. That's the way to proceed. So, okay, well, thank you very much. I hope this was educational to a lot of people. This has taken years to accumulate knowledge on all this and look up all these different things and kind of put all these different things together. But again, God made you with logical wisdom and order and a structure and a system, and there is a methodology to how your body works, and these on and off, these 1-0 switches in your DNA, these on and off or back and forth switches, and there's a lot more than that. Those are just some of the ones we talked about, but I wanted to go through this and just hopefully give you an education to help get your body better. And then I'm going to do a whole nother audiobook on Protien and MTOR, and then I'm probably going to end up doing a whole nother just on type 2 diabetes, which is basically sugar suicide and some of those things like that. So, okay, well, thank you very much, and it was my pleasure to share this with you, and I hope that you gleaned something from this to benefit you and edify you as a person. Thank you.